The day my daughter's wedding turned into a family war zone, I learned that the person who pays for the party gets to make the rules. But let me tell you, that lesson cost me $47,000 and nearly destroyed my relationship with my sister. My name is Sarah, and I'm a single mom who built a catering business from absolutely nothing. For the past 22 years, it's been just me, my daughter Emma, and my son Robert against the world. When Emma got engaged to Marcus last year, I knew I wanted to give her the fairy tale wedding she'd dreamed about since she was little. What I didn't know was that my own family would turn that dream into a nightmare. Picture this. It's 6 a.m. on what should be the happiest day of my life. I'm standing in my kitchen, still in my pajamas, holding a crumpled receipt that shows every penny I've spent on Emma's wedding. $47,000. That's my entire retirement savings, gone. The money I was supposed to use to finally take a vacation, maybe buy myself a decent car, or even just breathe a little easier after years of working 70-hour weeks. But here's the thing about being a mother. You don't think twice about these sacrifices. You see your baby girl's face light up when she talks about white roses and string quartets, and suddenly your own comfort doesn't matter anymore. Emma is 22, fresh out of college, working as a graphic designer and barely making enough to cover her own rent. Marcus is still in law school, supported by his wealthy parents who made it very clear they thought a small, intimate ceremony would be more appropriate for their budget. So I stepped up, because that's what mothers do. I personally tasted 17 different cakes before finding the perfect vanilla bean with raspberry filling that made Emma cry happy tears. I drove to 3 different states to find the exact shade of blush pink roses she saw in a magazine. I spent weekends learning about table linens and chair covers because hiring a wedding planner was out of my budget. Every detail of this wedding has my fingerprints on it. Bought with money I earned serving chicken dinners and organizing corporate events through my little catering company. My sister Jessica, she's 2 years younger than me, works in real estate, drives a BMW, and has never missed a chance to remind me that she married well while I chose the hard road as a single mom. Jessica has always had this way of making me feel like my efforts were never quite good enough. When Emma was growing up, Jessica would show up to school events with expensive gifts that made my handmade costumes look shabby. When Robert graduated high school, she threw him a party that completely overshadowed the small celebration I had planned. And her daughter, Madison? She's 19, spoiled rotten, and has this entitled attitude that makes my skin crawl. Madison has spent the entire engagement period making little comments about how she would have done things differently, how her future wedding will be so much more elegant, how she can't believe Emma chose such a basic venue. But today was supposed to be different. Today was supposed to be about Emma feeling like a princess, about our little family celebrating love and new beginnings. Today was supposed to prove that all those years of sacrifice were worth it. By 3 p.m., I'd be walking down that aisle myself, but not for the reason anyone expected. Because sometimes, when you've given everything you have, when you've emptied your bank account and poured your heart into making someone else's dreams come true, you reach a point where enough is enough. See, when you sacrifice everything to give your child their dream wedding, you never expect your own family to try and steal the spotlight. You never expect the people who should be supporting you to spend the morning of the wedding tearing apart every choice you've made. You never expect to overhear your own sister and niece talking about you like you're some kind of charity case who doesn't deserve respect. But that's exactly what happened, and what I did about it changed everything. Let me paint you a picture of who I really am, because understanding my story is crucial to understanding why what happened next shook me to my core. 22 years ago, when Emma was just 3 years old, her father decided that being a husband and dad wasn't for him anymore. He packed his bags one Tuesday morning and left me with a toddler, a newborn son, and exactly $400 in our checking account. No child support, no forwarding address, no explanation beyond a note that said he needed to find himself. So I found myself instead. I found myself working 3 jobs while my babies slept. I found myself learning to cook for large groups when Mrs. Henderson down the street asked if I could cater her book club meeting for $50. I found myself slowly, carefully, building what would become Sarah's Catering from my tiny apartment kitchen, one dinner party at a time. For 20 years, I've worked 70-hour weeks. I've missed school plays because I was serving dinner to strangers. I've worn the same 3 dresses to every important event because every extra dollar went to Emma's dance lessons or Robert's baseball equipment. I've driven a car with a broken air conditioner for 6 years because fixing it meant less money for the kids' college funds. But here's what I've never missed. I've never missed being the mother my children needed. When Emma had her heart broken by her high school boyfriend, I was there with ice cream and terrible movies. When Robert broke his arm and needed surgery, I was there holding his hand. When Emma graduated college summa cum laude, I was in the front row crying my eyes out because my baby girl had accomplished something I never had the chance to do. Emma's wedding represents everything I've worked for. It's proof that sacrifice pays off, that love conquers all, that a single mother can give her daughter a fairy tale ending. When she got engaged to Marcus 8 months ago, I started planning immediately. Not just the party, but the financing. I calculated exactly how much I could afford to spend without going into debt. And then I spent twice that amount, because I couldn't bear to see disappointment in her eyes. The venue is Rosewood Garden Estate, about an hour outside the city. It's this gorgeous property with century-old oak trees and a gazebo that looks like something from a romance novel. The moment Emma saw it, she started crying. The rental fee was $8,000 for the day. I wrote that check without hesitation, even though it represented 2 months of my salary. This morning, I'm at the venue by 7 a.m. coordinating with the florist, the photographer, the caterer I hired instead of doing it myself because Emma wanted her mom to be a guest, not the help. The irony isn't lost on me. I'm successful enough in catering to afford to hire someone else, but I'm paying for it with money I'll never get back. Emma is getting ready in the bridal suite, surrounded by her college friends who are all squealing over her dress. She looks absolutely radiant, and for a moment all the stress melts away. This is why I did it. This pure joy on my daughter's face is worth every dollar. But then Jessica arrives with Madison in tow. Jessica steps out of her BMW wearing a dress that probably costs more than my monthly mortgage payment. She surveys the venue with this critical eye, like she's appraising real estate. Madison is glued to her phone, already taking selfies and posting them with captions about being at her cousin's cute little wedding. "Oh, Sarah," Jessica says, giving me one of her fake smiles, "I thought you were going for something more upscale." Well, I suppose this is charming in its own way. I feel my jaw clench, but I force myself to stay calm. Everything here was chosen with love, Jess. That's what matters. Of course, she says, but she's already looking around for flaws. The flowers are lovely, very budget conscious. Budget conscious. Those roses cost me $300 per arrangement, and there are 12 of them. But I don't say that. I just smile and excuse myself to check on the sound system because I can already feel this day slipping away from me, and we haven't even started yet. What started as subtle jabs quickly escalated into something that made my blood boil. Jessica wasn't just being her usual passive-aggressive self. She was actively trying to undermine everything I'd worked so hard to create. Within 30 minutes of arriving, Jessica had managed to find fault with nearly every aspect of the wedding. She questioned why I chose white chairs instead of the more sophisticated gold ones. She wondered aloud if the string quartet was really the best choice, since orchestras were so much more elegant. She even had the audacity to suggest that the menu seemed a bit heavy for an afternoon wedding. Each comment felt like a tiny knife, but I kept my mouth shut because this was Emma's day, not mine. I watched Jessica work the room, introducing herself to Marcus's family as the bride's aunt who tried to help with the planning, as if she'd contributed a single dollar or idea to this wedding. But it was Madison who really pushed me over the edge. This girl, who's never worked a real job in her life, who gets her car payments and credit card bills paid by mommy and daddy, started positioning herself as some kind of wedding expert on social media. She was posting Instagram stories about wedding inspiration and family celebrations, but with this subtle undertone that suggested she could have done everything better. I watched her corner Emma's college friends, showing them pictures on her phone of weddings she claimed were her style. More upscale, more sophisticated, more expensive. She kept using that word, expensive, like it was some kind of badge of honor. The breaking point came around noon, when I needed to use the restroom in the bridal suite. Emma had gone to take photos with Marcus, and I thought the room was empty. But as I approached the bathroom, I heard voices coming from inside. Jessica and Madison were having a conversation, and they clearly thought they had complete privacy. "Honestly, your cousin always has to be the center of attention," Jessica was saying, and I could hear the eye roll in her voice. "Even at her own wedding, she's acting like some kind of princess. Did you see how she practically cried when she saw those basic roses?" My hand froze on the bathroom door handle. They were talking about Emma. My Emma, who had tears of joy because she thought the roses were the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. "I know, right?" Madison replied, and I could hear her applying lipstick while she talked. "And did you see what Aunt Sarah is wearing? She looks like she raided a discount rack. I mean, I get that she doesn't have money, but couldn't she have at least tried to look decent for her own daughter's wedding? The dress I was wearing cost me $200. $200 I couldn't afford, but I bought it anyway because I wanted to look nice for Emma's special day. I'd spent an hour that morning doing my hair and makeup, trying to look like I belonged among Marcus's wealthy family. Well, what do you expect?" Jessica continued, and her voice had this cruel edge to it that I'd never heard before. "She's always been the dramatic one in the family. Remember Emma's graduation? She made that all about herself too, crying and carrying on like she was the one getting the degree. I had cried at Emma's graduation because I was proud, because I had worked 2 jobs to pay her tuition, because I had helped her with homework at midnight after working 14-hour days, because watching her walk across that stage represented every sacrifice I'd ever made. At least people will actually notice me today," Madison said with a laugh. "I look way better than the bride anyway. Emma's dress is pretty, but it's so basic. Mine cost more than hers, and it shows." That's when something inside me snapped. Madison hadn't contributed a penny to this wedding, but she was comparing her guest dress to Emma's wedding gown like they were in some kind of competition. She was treating my daughter's wedding like it was her personal fashion show. I stood there in that hallway, listening to my sister and niece tear apart everything I'd worked for, everything I'd sacrificed for, and I realized something that changed everything. I was done being the family doormat. For 22 years, I'd been the responsible one, the one who worked hard while Jessica married well. I'd been the one who stayed quiet when she made her little comments, who smiled and nodded when she offered her unwanted advice. I'd let her make me feel small because I thought keeping the peace was more important than standing up for myself. But this wasn't about me anymore. This was about Emma, and I'd be damned if I was going to let anyone ruin her perfect day with their jealousy and entitled attitudes. After hearing that conversation, I couldn't just stand there anymore. I backed away from the bathroom door as quietly as possible, my heart pounding so hard I was sure everyone in the building could hear it. I needed air. I needed space to think. I needed to figure out what the hell I was going to do about this situation. I walked outside to the garden area where the ceremony would take place in just a few hours. The chairs were arranged in perfect rows, white ribbons tied to each one, with the exact same precision I'd insisted on when I was planning this whole thing. The altar was decorated with those basic roses that had cost me $300 per arrangement. Everything looked exactly like Emma had dreamed it would. But standing there alone, looking at the fruit of all my labor and sacrifice, something crystallized in my mind. This wasn't just about Jessica's jealousy or Madison's spoiled attitude. This was about respect. This was about 22 years of being treated like the lesser sister, the one who worked while Jessica played, the one who struggled while Jessica succeeded through marriage. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app, something I'd been avoiding all morning because I knew what I'd see. Account balance, $1,247. 24 hours ago, before I paid the final vendor invoices, I had over $48,000 in that account. My entire retirement fund gone. The emergency fund I'd built up over 15 years of careful saving wiped out. The money I was supposed to use to finally take that trip to Europe I'd been dreaming about since Emma graduated high school vanished. But you know what? I wasn't angry about spending the money. I was angry about being disrespected for spending it. As I stood there, guests started arriving for the ceremony. I watched Marcus's parents step out of their Mercedes, dressed in clothes that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. They nodded politely at the decorations, and I could see them taking in every detail with the same critical eye Jessica had used earlier. The difference was they were strangers. Their opinions stung, but they didn't cut to the bone like family betrayal. Then I saw Jessica and Madison emerge from the bridal suite, both of them laughing about something. Madison was still on her phone, probably posting more of her wedding commentary to her Instagram followers. Jessica was adjusting her expensive dress and checking her makeup in her phone camera. They looked like they were having the time of their lives, completely unaware that I'd heard every cruel word they'd said. That's when I made my decision. I wasn't going to let this slide. I wasn't going to sit in my assigned seat like a good little mother of the bride while my sister and niece spent the entire ceremony smirking about how pathetic they thought Emma and I were. I wasn't going to let them treat my daughter's wedding like their personal entertainment, but I also wasn't going to ruin Emma's day with a family screaming match. Emma didn't deserve that. She deserved her fairy tale moment, her perfect ceremony, her dream wedding. She'd worked so hard in college. She'd found a man who truly loved her, and she'd been nothing but grateful for everything I'd done to make this day happen. So I came up with a plan. I walked back toward the bridal suite, not to confront Jessica and Madison privately, but to check on Emma one more time before the ceremony. She was putting on her veil, surrounded by her bridesmaids, glowing with happiness. When she saw me, she rushed over and hugged me so tight I thought she might wrinkle her dress. "Mom, thank you," she whispered in my ear. "Thank you for everything. I know how much this cost, and I know how hard you worked. I love you so much." That hug gave me all the strength I needed. I helped Emma with her veil, kissed her cheek, and told her I'd see her at the altar. Then I walked back outside, but instead of taking my assigned seat in the front row, I positioned myself near the side aisle where I'd have a clear view of everyone, and everyone would have a clear view of me. The minister, Father Rodriguez, had known our family for years. He'd baptized Emma, confirmed her, and now he was going to marry her. When I caught his eye before the ceremony started, I gave him a small nod. We'd talked about the ceremony structure weeks ago, and I knew exactly when he'd ask if anyone had anything to say. I wasn't going to object to the marriage. I loved Marcus, and he made Emma happy. But I was going to say something about respect, about family, and about the real meaning of this day, and I was going to say it in front of everyone who mattered. The ceremony began like something out of a movie. Emma looked absolutely stunning as she walked down the aisle on Robert's arm. Her father might have abandoned us, but her big brother stepped up like he always did. The string quartet played Pachelbel's canon perfectly, every note floating through the garden like a promise of happiness. Marcus stood at the altar with tears in his eyes, and for a moment I forgot all about Jessica and Madison. This was pure magic. Father Rodriguez began the ceremony with his warm, familiar voice. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Emma Catherine and Marcus James in holy matrimony." He spoke about love, commitment, and the families coming together to support this new marriage. I could see Jessica dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, probably posting about what a beautiful ceremony it was. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. If there is anyone present who knows of any lawful impediment, why these two should not be joined in marriage, Father Rodriguez said, looking out over the assembled guests. Let them speak now or forever, hold their peace. The traditional pause. Most people expect silence here, maybe a nervous laugh or two, but I stood up. You could have heard a pin drop. 150 heads turned toward me, and I saw the confusion ripple through the crowd. Emma's eyes went wide, and Marcus looked like he might faint. Jessica's face went completely white, but I wasn't objecting to the marriage. I was claiming my moment. "Father Rodriguez, thank you," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "I'm not objecting to this beautiful union, but before my daughter and Marcus exchange vows, I have something important to say about respect, family, and what this day really means." I could see people whispering, phones being discreetly pulled out to record, but Emma was looking at me with trust in her eyes, and that gave me the courage to continue. "Emma, sweetheart, you look absolutely breathtaking. Marcus, welcome to our family with open arms, but I need everyone here to understand something. Important. This wedding, this beautiful celebration you're all enjoying, represents every dollar I've saved for the past 5 years. I gestured toward the roses, the chairs, the elegant decorations. I've worked 70-hour weeks, skipped vacations, and yes, I emptied my entire retirement account because I believe in love and I believe in family. Every flower you see, every chair you're sitting in, every piece of music you're about to hear during the reception was paid for by someone who loves Emma more than her own financial security. Jessica was frantically whispering to Madison, probably telling her to stay quiet, but it was too late for that. Now, I'm not asking for gratitude, I continued, looking directly at Jessica. I'm not asking for praise or recognition, but I am demanding respect. Emma deserves a family that celebrates her accomplishments, not one that spends her wedding day gossiping about how basic her choices are or how poor her mother looks. The crowd was completely silent now. Marcus's parents were listening intently, and I could see understanding dawning on several faces. To any family members who've spent today criticizing my choices, mocking my daughter's dress, or treating this celebration like it's not good enough for your standards, I want you to remember something. Every detail you see here was chosen with love and paid for with sacrifice. If you can't respect that, if you can't celebrate Emma without tearing down everything I've worked for, then I suggest you reconsider whether you're really here for the right reasons. Madison tried to sink lower in her chair, but there was nowhere to hide. Jessica opened her mouth like she was going to say something, but I held up my hand. This isn't about money, I said, my voice getting stronger. This is about dignity. This is about teaching my daughter that she deserves people in her life who lift her up, not tear her down. And this is about setting boundaries that probably should have been set years ago. Then Emma did something that surprised everyone. She stepped away from Marcus, walked down from the altar, and came straight to me. In front of everyone in her beautiful white dress, she hugged me tight. "Mom," she said loud enough for everyone to hear, "thank you for everything. Not just for paying for today, but for showing me what strength looks like." The crowd erupted in applause. Real applause, not polite clapping. Marcus joined us, embracing both of us. Even Robert walked over from his position and put his arm around the whole group. Jessica looked mortified, but she stayed in her seat. Madison had her head down, probably deleting her Instagram posts. "Now," I said, stepping back and smoothing Emma's veil, "let's have a wedding." The rest of the ceremony was absolutely perfect. After my moment of truth, something shifted in the entire atmosphere of the wedding. Emma and Marcus exchanged vows with even more emotion than I'd expected, and when they kissed as husband and wife, the applause was thunderous. People weren't just clapping politely, they were genuinely celebrating love, family, and the courage it takes to stand up for what's right. But the real magic happened during the reception. As guests moved from the ceremony area to the reception tent, I was overwhelmed by the response. People I barely knew came up to me with tears in their eyes, telling me how moved they were by what I'd said. Marcus's grandmother, this elegant woman in her 80s who I'd been intimidated to meet, grabbed my hands and said, "Honey, that took guts. Emma is lucky to have a mother who fights for her family." Even some of Marcus's law school friends approached me, saying they wish their own parents had shown that kind of backbone during difficult family situations. One young woman told me that watching me stand up to family bullies gave her the courage to address her own toxic relatives. But the conversation that mattered most happened about an hour into the reception. Emma found me during the cocktail hour, still in her wedding dress but with her shoes kicked off, looking more relaxed and happy than I'd seen her all day. She pulled me aside to a quiet corner of the garden where we could talk privately. "Mom," she said, her eyes filling with tears. I had no idea what Aunt Jessica and Madison were saying. "I'm so sorry you had to hear that, and I'm even more sorry that you felt like you had to defend our family alone." That's when I realized something important. Emma wasn't embarrassed by what I'd done. She was proud of me, and she was angry at herself for not seeing what was happening. "Sweetheart," I told her, "you were busy being a bride. You were supposed to be thinking about your dress and your vows and your future with Marcus, not managing family drama. That's my job as your mother." "But it shouldn't be," she said firmly. "I'm 22 years old and I should have noticed when my own aunt was being cruel to my mother. I should have said something the moment she made that comment about the flowers being budget conscious. We talked for 20 minutes, just the two of us, about family dynamics and respect and the fine line between keeping the peace and being a doormat. Emma told me she'd always known Jessica was competitive with me, but she'd never realized how cruel that competition had become. "From now on," Emma said, "we're a team. If someone disrespects you, they're disrespecting me too, and I won't stand for it." That conversation alone was worth every penny I'd spent on the wedding. The evening continued with more surprises. Robert gave a toast that had everyone in tears, talking about how I'd raised him and Emma to value hard work, integrity, and standing up for what's right. He said that watching me speak up during the ceremony reminded him why he was proud to be my son. Then Marcus's father approached me during dinner. This man, who I'd been sure looked down on our modest celebration, asked if he could speak with me privately. I expected criticism, but instead he apologized. "Sarah," he said, "I want you to know that Marcus's mother and I have tremendous respect for what you've accomplished as a single parent. We've been worried about whether our son was ready for marriage, but watching how your family handles adversity with such grace, we know he's marrying into good people." As for Jessica and Madison, they stayed for the entire reception, but the dynamic between us had fundamentally changed. Jessica approached me during the father-daughter dance. Well, mother-daughter dance, since Emma asked me to fill that role too. "Sarah," she said quietly, "we need to talk. Not here, not tonight, but soon. I owe you an apology, and Madison does too." I nodded, but I didn't make it easy for her. "Yes, we do need to talk, because what happened today can never happen again." By the end of the night, as Emma and Marcus left for their honeymoon and the last guests filtered out, I stood in that garden surrounded by the remnants of the most expensive and most important day of my life. My bank account was empty, but my heart was full. The lesson I learned that day changed everything about how I interact with my family and the world. Being a good mother doesn't mean being a silent doormat. Sometimes protecting your children means showing them how to stand up for themselves and their values. Sometimes love requires difficult conversations and uncomfortable truths. Emma's wedding taught our whole family that respect isn't something you give just because someone shares your DNA. It's something you earn through your actions and your character. And that day, standing up for my daughter and myself, I finally learned the difference between keeping the peace and keeping my dignity. As I drove home that night, tired but triumphant, I realized I'd given Emma something more valuable than an expensive wedding. I'd shown her that she comes from a family of strong women who don't back down when it matters most. So that's my story about the day I learned that love sometimes means drawing a line in the sand, even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's uncomfortable. Looking back now, 6 months later, I can tell you that everything changed after Emma's wedding, not just in my family, but in how I see myself. I'm no longer the sister who stays quiet to keep the peace. I'm no longer the mother who absorbs disrespect to protect everyone else's feelings. I'm someone who stands up for what's right, even when my voice shakes. Emma and Marcus are doing wonderfully, by the way. They send me pictures from their little apartment, and Emma calls me every Sunday to check in. She started setting her own boundaries with family members, and I'm so proud of the strong woman she's becoming. She told me last week that she finally understood what I meant when I used to say that respect is earned, not given. She's applying that lesson in her marriage, her friendships, and even at work when colleagues try to take advantage of her kindness. Robert has become even more protective of our family since the wedding. He calls me his hero, which makes me cry every single time. He's dating someone wonderful now, and he's already told her about the wedding speech. He said he wants to marry someone who has the same backbone I showed that day. I raised him right. As for Jessica and me, we did have that conversation, I promised. It happened 3 weeks after the wedding, in my kitchen over coffee that grew cold while we talked for 4 hours. It was difficult, honest, and long overdue. She admitted that she'd been jealous of the relationship I have with my kids, jealous of how they respect and love me despite all our financial struggles. She said she'd been making those cruel comments because she felt like her own relationship with Madison was superficial, based on money and material things, rather than genuine connection. We're working on rebuilding our relationship, with mutual respect this time. It's not perfect and probably never will be, but it's honest. Jessica has started making more of an effort with Emma and Robert, and she's stopped making those passive-aggressive comments about my choices. Progress, not perfection. Madison is actually in therapy now, learning about empathy and consequences. Jessica finally realized that always bailing her daughter out and never holding her accountable was creating a monster. Sometimes the best thing you can do for someone you love is to stop enabling their worst behavior. Madison wrote me a letter last month apologizing for what she said and did at the wedding. It felt genuine, and I appreciated the effort. But here's what I really want you to take away from this story. You don't have to set yourself on fire to keep other people warm. You can love your family, sacrifice for your children, and be generous with your heart without allowing people to treat you like you don't matter. Your kindness is not weakness, and standing up for yourself is not selfishness. I spent 22 years thinking that being a good mother meant absorbing every insult, every slight, every moment of disrespect in silence. I thought protecting my children meant never making waves, even when people were drowning me in their negativity. But that day at Emma's wedding, I realized I was teaching my children the wrong lesson. I was showing them that it's okay to let people walk all over you as long as you love them. If you're dealing with family members who take your sacrifices for granted, or if you're struggling with setting boundaries with people you love, remember that respect is not optional. It's the foundation of every healthy relationship. You can be kind without being a doormat. You can be loving without being a victim. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is to refuse to accept treatment that diminishes your worth. Now, if this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear about it. Drop a comment below and tell me about a time you had to stand up for yourself or your family. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to choose between keeping the peace and keeping your dignity? What did you learn from it? Have you ever had to set boundaries with family members who didn't respect your sacrifices? I read every single comment, and your stories inspire me to keep sharing mine. And if you enjoyed this story, please give this video a thumbs up. It really helps the algorithm share these stories with people who might need to hear them. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you want more real-life stories about family, relationships, and finding the courage to stand up for what's right. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a story. I share new stories every week about the moments that change our lives and the lessons we learn along the way. Sometimes they're about triumph, sometimes about heartbreak, but they're always about real people facing real challenges with courage and grace. Until next time, remember, you deserve respect. Your sacrifices matter. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to accept anything less than the treatment you deserve. Take care, and I'll see you in the next story.